All right, a back to basics episode today on the Peaks Life. The 3Ks of the keto world, what are they?
They are the ketogenic lifestyle.
Bingo.
They
One.
are ketones.
Me, two.
And they are ketosis. So if you want to find out about those 3Ks, stay tuned and we'll tell you all about them, what they mean, how to explain them to your friends, and how to get the best out of your ketogenic lifestyle.
Join us soon. So today, great news, we're doing a back to basics day.
Great, love it.
Because there is a huge number of people starting keto.
100%.
And there is a huge number of people interested in keto, but everyone seems to want to get to the next step without thinking about the basics. So what I wanted to do today was really take a step back, and for those people maybe who are tuning in who are just starting keto, or those people who are jumping ahead and getting into what foods do I buy, what measurements do I take, all those things, to go back a step and say, what is keto? What is ketosis? What are ketones? Those 3Ks, the KKK of the keto lifestyle. So we'll just get back to basics in very simple layman's terms.
Great.
Let's get the basics sorted out first of all so everyone's on the same page before we get into some of the more complex things.
Makes sense.
So welcome to the Peaks Life. Welcome to a new edition, and welcome Lynn Fernie.
Lynn Fernie, Mike Warren, here to tell you all about
I was so excited I forgot to intro us.
You forgot to intro us. So here we are. We're going to tell you all about those bite-sized chunks of wellness wisdom
we do.
that are going to power you through your day. And I love the fact that we've picked this topic, Mike, because I do agree there are so many people now picking up on keto. There are many people out there having amazing success, and so everywhere you look, people are saying, well, I want some of that too, but what is it?
Yes.
What do I do? How do I do it? And they don't know where to start.
Yes.
So I think this is great. If this is you, if you're out there, if you're listening and watching, and you want to know where to start, let's cover those basics off so you understand what this is all about.
Or even if you're in the middle of it, you might be in keto transition syndrome, right in the middle of that first 30 days, and you're still confused about ketones, ketosis, all those things. So it's a good way to step back and just take a moment to go, okay, get back to basics, learn the important stuff first, and then continue your journey.
Yeah, 100% cool. Right.
All right, let's get into it.
All right, and also, I will give a third situation. There are people around who will challenge you.
Absolutely.
And they'll ask you what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, and they'll try and suggest it's maybe not good or not healthy or not sustainable or not for the long term. And because this is, it's likely that you, as most people do, you get onto this way of eating, you find how good it is, and then you decide, well, this is for life because I love this.
Yes.
I love the way I feel. I love all the benefits. And you actually just want to be able to explain it to your friends and your family and the people that ask you.
Yeah, good point.
Who are curious.
Yes.
So because you probably started a bit of a rolling stone that people that's picking up grass along the way. People are starting to say, "Oh, you look good. You look healthy. You look happy. You look, very enthusiastic today. You're full of energy.
Yep.
What's your secret?" So,
yes.
well, I'm doing this keto thing, but you don't know how to explain it. So here we go. We'll give you some bite-sized wellness chunks to explain it.
Get your friends excited and get them on board the keto journey.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go back a step. So let's presume that, let's say that someone tuning in, someone listening in today is just starting the keto journey, so they're probably on maybe a low-fat, some carbohydrate, a traditional diet, and then moving across into keto. What do we need to know as we start to think about going into keto?
Yeah, so if that's you, so there are lots of people out there right now listening and watching who will be a traditional eater, in the sense of you're eating the standard American diet, Western diet, European diet, Australian diet, whatever you want to call it. It's what most of the developed nations eat, which means you're eating lots of carbohydrates. And by that we mean, the pastries, the breads, the pastas, the pizzas, the burgers with the bun.
Yes.
All of those sort of foods. You may be following all the health advice. You may be eating a healthy version, so you may be going more for the whole grains. So you've gone for the brown rice, and you've gone the quinoa and the amaranth and all those alternative grains. You may even have cut out gluten, but you're still eating lots of grains. Or you may be eating the dirty forms of diet. So you may be going for the junk foods, the processed foods. But whatever you're doing, you're likely to be eating a lot of carbohydrates throughout your day. You might be drinking the sodas, the Coca-Colas, all of those sort of things. And so you're fueled by carbohydrates during your day. And as you said, you're probably eating low fat because all of the health advice over the years has been eat low fat, eat low fat, and so you go to the supermarket and the shelves are full of products branded as being
Low fat.
low fat.
So you grab those thinking you're doing the right thing.
That's right, and what they're actually doing is they're replacing the fat with sugar and carbs, and so they're bulked up with lots and lots of carbohydrates, lots and lots of sugar. So
Yes.
you're probably consuming a very large proportion of your food in the form of carbohydrates. So that could well be you.
Good.
And if you're looking at going from that to keto way of eating, you're going from one extreme to the other, because that carb eater and the keto way of eating are really at opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So you couldn't get much further apart, actually. So it's a very big change.
I understand. So to make it easy for people who are tuning in, what's the primary difference between, I guess, a body that's fueled by, and you're talking about this traditional eating, fueled by carbs and sugars, versus a body that's fueled by ketones and ketosis? How would you put that into simple terms for someone to explain to their friends, this is what ketosis means, or this is what keto lifestyle means?
Yeah, so there are two fuel sources for the body,
Right.
essentially. One of them is glucose,
Yes.
and one of them is ketones. And we'll go into more detail in a second, but glucose in the body comes from carbohydrates that you eat, the sugars and the carbohydrates.
Okay.
They turn into glucose in the body,
Yes.
and your body can run on that fuel source, and it can also run on this other fuel source, which is ketones, which are made from dietary fat or fat in the body. So
Right.
the body will produce ketones. And I think it's quite fascinating, actually, because the body can run on these two completely different fuel sources, and it can actually switch over between the two. So our bodies basically were designed to run on anything. And
Wow.
the reason for that is, if you go way back in our ancestry, we had to eat whatever was available.
Yes.
So there may have been times when there were animals available, and those animals carried body fat. So we got meat and we got fat, protein and fat.
Yes.
And we didn't find vegetables, we didn't find fruits, we didn't find honey or any other natural source of sweetener and sugar. So we went without carbohydrates. Our bodies ran on those ketones. And in other times, there was lots of berries available because they're in season. So we'd eat those, or we'd find a stash of honey, and we'd eat the honey, and our bodies could run on the glucose that it got from those carbohydrates. So our bodies are absolutely amazing, the fact that there's two fuel sources.
Yes.
And they're able to run on either of them. So essentially, when we talk about keto, we're talking about this way of eating that fuels us with ketones. And when we talk about traditional Western or American diets, we're talking about where we are eating carbohydrates and running on glucose.
And just a point, we don't, when we talk about someone who's in ketosis or on a keto lifestyle, their body is fueled by ketones. But we don't talk about them being fueled by ketones and carbohydrates.
No,
Because
so
we move across to one pure fuel source, yeah?
yeah. So I think one of the things it's really good to have a look at where all this has come from.
Yes.
Before we get into all the detail on the two types of eating. So way back in around about 1958, there was a guy called Ansel Keys.
Ansel Keys.
Ansel
Got a lot of responsibility, that man, isn't he?
He's got a lot to answer for.
A lot to answer for, he has.
And he basically did a fairly famous study called the 7 Countries Study. And what he was doing was, he'd been given the question, he was a researcher, and he'd been given the question, what is it that causes cardiovascular disease? Because after the Second World War, we saw an increase in the amount of cardiovascular disease. And initially it had been put down to the increase in smoking,
Yes.
post-war, but then it looked like there was something else going on. So they were trying to answer this question of, why are we seeing an increase in the cardiovascular disease, the heart problems, the circulatory problems, so heart attacks, strokes and that sort of thing. And so he went off and he did this research project, and he did this big study, and he looked at many different countries, and he looked at the association between diet and cardiovascular disease. Now, he
Yes.
didn't look at things like smoking, he just looked at diet. Now, what he did, in his wisdom, is he chose to be very selective about the results that he put into the study.
Yes.
So he found a pattern, and he chose 7 countries, and he took the data from those 7 countries. Now, as it happened, there were lots of other countries that, had he included them, his outcomes would have been very different. But he chose these particular 7 countries because what they showed was an indication, and I'm using my words really carefully, it's only an indication, it was an inference, that saturated fat in the diet, so things like butter and ghee and tallow and lard and all of those, and coconut oil, all of those saturated fats, they caused cardiovascular disease. So his study jumped to the conclusion, based on these 7 countries, that you shouldn't eat saturated fat because it will cause problems with your heart and your circulatory system. It will cause the heart attacks and the strokes.
Yes.
So he then got funding, and he got some of the big health associations on board. He got sponsorship, and that study escalated, and it ended up in the American dietary guidelines. And the American dietary guidelines are effectively set in stone. Everybody's given the advice. They go through all of the schools. Every other country essentially follows along at some point. So everybody ended up brainwashed from the early 1960s when that made it into our dietary guidelines. And what we were told was saturated fat is bad, get it out of your diet, it causes high cholesterol, it causes cardiovascular disease, and salt is also bad. So we were told get rid of those and eat a low-fat diet and eat plenty of whole grain. So there's where we got our advice to go high carbohydrate and low fat.
And we had that advice for 40, 50, 60, 70 years, haven't we?
So let's say the last
60 years that's been drilled in. But those findings have now been absolutely disproven.
We are more and more, we're finding that it was false. The study itself, as I said, the study was flawed.
Yes.
So the research he did was flawed. The information, the fact that he selected 7 countries was pretty poor research and practice. We've now gone into the detail and understood that the mechanisms that he was looking at by which cardiovascular disease was caused, they were all incorrect.
Yes.
So everything he did, everything from the way the study was designed to the conclusions he drew, to the advice that was taken from it, they've all been disproved in one form or another. Now, what you find is that if you go to 90% of medical practitioners or 90% of nutritionists or schools or anywhere where dietary advice is given, they probably still don't realise that things have changed.
Yes.
They are still working on those old guidelines of eat low fat, eat carbohydrates. The tide is changing, and we're seeing now a bigger and bigger body of people getting themselves educated, understanding that that wasn't correct. And we're seeing things like the ketogenic diet, the ketogenic lifestyle, the ketogenic way of eating becoming incredibly popular, because what it does is it effectively reverses a lot of the damage that was done with that way of eating.
But also popular, but also now supported by research and science, not just a fad diet. Now there's a lot of dietary guidelines from a lot of countries that are starting to be softened and leaning towards the higher fat, low carbohydrate, as they realise that the Ansel Keys 70 years of misinformation was incorrect, and they're starting to move to more the ketogenic lifestyle.
100%. And there's a couple of things that are really important to say here. I think that, remember I just said our body can run on both sources of fuel.
Yes.
So our body can actually run on glucose quite happily without any adverse effects when it's eaten in moderation. And you don't hear me say this very often because I am a big proponent and big fan of the keto lifestyle. But if you look back in history only 100, 200 years, people ate a little bit of carbohydrate without too much problems. So, it's not true to say we should never have carbohydrates. We've never had carbohydrates in our history. We're not designed. We are designed. We are designed when it's not possible to run on ketones. We can run on glucose. Our problem is that we have so many carbohydrates available to us 24/7.
Yes.
And we have gone from just eating a moderate amount to eating huge quantities of carbohydrates.
Absolutely.
Every day, all day. That's when the problems have arisen.
Yes.
So if you look back 80 or 90 years, people weren't suffering the problems with obesity, whereas today 35% of Americans are classified as obese.
Good.
So our problems are coming not because we consume glucose per se, but because we consume far too much of it in the wrong forms, in really unhealthy forms.
Understand.
So what we've got now is, when we're looking at the keto way of life and the keto way of eating, it can basically, as I said, reverse a lot of the damage, a lot of the problems, And it's amazing for weight loss, for increasing energy. So if you've been in the trap of eating carbohydrates, if you're a sugar addict, if you're overweight or you're obese, or you've got type 2 diabetes, or you've got a metabolic condition, or any of the things that are caused by these excess carbohydrates, the excess glucose, then what we now know is that the ketogenic diet is amazing and can reverse that. It can reverse type 2 diabetes. It can combat metabolic conditions. It can help with autoimmune conditions. It can help with inflammatory conditions. It allows you to shed weight very quickly down to the weight that your body should be at. It increases your energy. So it has multitude of benefits, and it also has benefits in terms of cancer treatment, cancer prevention, and we're finding every day new benefits.
Yes.
So be reassured if you are on the ketogenic way of eating, or you're on, you've
it's the right
moved
path
to the ketogenic lifestyle 100%. You've made the best decision you could, best decision for your body, because we now know that this is an absolutely amazing way of eating and very, very healthy.
All right, so now we've some great background there and some information on why it's such a great lifestyle. So if someone's explaining to a friend or family member what is the ketogenic diet, it is simply changing the fuel source.
That's right.
From carbohydrates into glucose, from carbohydrates, sugar into glucose as a fuel source, to fats into ketones as a fuel source. It's a change of fuel source. And then if they were to be saying, so what are ketones? Give me a layperson's answer. What are ketones? Where are they made? How do they work?
Yeah, so if we look at ketones, basically ketones are made in three cases in the body. The first one is when we fast.
Right.
So when we fast and we burn through any glucose that is left in our system.
Yes.
So let's say even if we've been a carbohydrate eater and we've got some glucose in the body, glycogen and glucose in the muscles, our body will first of all burn through that preferentially.
Yes.
So we burn through the glucose. Once we've got rid of all the glucose and we're fasting, the body realises it's no longer getting glucose, and it says, hey, oh, hang on a bit, you're not going to feed me, so I've got to do something else. And like I said, the body is so smart. It says, no more glucose, I'll find some other source of fuel.
Excellent.
Looks in the body, and what have we got in the body?
Ketones.
Well, we've got fat.
We've got fat
Everywhere. Even a very skinny person will have plenty of body fat, at least enough for a week. So basically the body looks around and says, hello, you've got plenty of fat.
Come to me, come to me, come to me.
Come in, spinner, I'll have some of that. And it literally converts that fat in the liver into ketones, into fatty acids and ketones.
Right.
So, and it then can run on those ketones quite happily as a fuel. So
okay,
the
so in
first
fasting
is when we're fasting.
Good. Okay, next one.
So it's used its own body fat.
Yes.
Second case is when we're eating fat as the major proportion of our diet. So we're getting our calories largely from fat. So in this case, we've eliminated or almost eliminated the carbohydrates.
Right. So low carbohydrate.
We're down to
80% fat.
Maybe less than an ounce of carbohydrate.
So the body's not getting confused. It just knows that fat is the primary source.
That's it. Because if we take in carbohydrates, the body will use them first.
Yes.
Because they're very, very easy to burn in the body. So we've got the carbohydrates right down, very low carbohydrates, and we're eating a bit of protein and a lot of fat. Now in that case, the body can take the dietary fat and it can again convert that in the liver into fatty acids and ketones.
Right.
And there we go, we've got our source of ketones again. So we can either fast or we can eat, and in that case we eat our own body fat.
Yes.
or we can eat fats, and in that case the body uses the dietary fat to make the ketones.
So just a quick question, because I know some people will be asking this. If I have too much dietary fat, my body then won't eat my own body fat as a source. So you've got to make sure that balance is correct.
That's right. So if we're eating a lot of dietary fat, which is very useful when we're making the transition into keto, and we might want to talk about that in a second. But once we're transitioned into keto, we're fat adapted, if we eat excess dietary fat, then our body won't actually burn its own fat.
Okay.
Why would it? It's lazy.
Yes,
we're just giving it plenty of fat.
Yes.
And it says, well, it's a little bit harder to convert the body fat.
Absolutely.
So leave that alone, because the body's smart. The body's saying to itself, you might not feed me in a couple of days' time. You might do one of those
Yeah.
clever fasts.
Yes.
So I best leave enough fat in the body for when you're fasting.
Because the body is simply an animal, it's a mammal, and it's like any other animal, there is a survival mode,
Exactly.
and it always protects itself, whether it's hydrating or whether it's fat, it stores
Yeah.
what it needs in case there's a major incident
In
that
case
needs it
there's a
to
famine.
eat itself.
That's it. So it's it's basically storing that body fat for the next famine. The next time you're going to do one of those 36-hour fasts,
Yes.
it'll leave it there. So it'll use the dietary fat first. So if you're in keto or you're on keto and you're not losing weight, do have a look at how much fat you're having.
Yes.
First of all, are you having enough or are you having too much?
Okay, so in fasting, we produce ketones. Dietary fat, we produce ketones.
That's right.
And third one?
I said there was a third one. And
You
the
did?
third one is when you exercise intensely.
Oof, okay.
And the reason for that is that you're going to actually burn through the sources of glucose in the body.
Okay.
All right, so you basically consume all of that glucose and glycogen that your body's storing, so if you go off and run a marathon, for example,
Yes.
and you're out there for 4 or 5 hours, then during that 4 or 5 hours, what we know is most people who are used to eating carbohydrates hit the wall at some point, maybe after 2 or 3 hours. That's because they've consumed or they've burned all of the glucose that's left in the body.
Right.
And at that point in time, once you've used it all, there's no more glucose. Your body's got to switch its fuel source, otherwise you're going to go into hibernation.
Absolutely.
Your brain will shut down and your body will start to shut down. So it will start to produce ketones as a response to the fact that, again, it's not getting any fuel.
Okay, so we've talked about the keto lifestyle, we've talked about keto and ketones. My last K question today, if someone says, what is ketosis? Am I in ketosis? Can you explain ketosis to me? What's a nice, easy answer for ketosis?
So we're in ketosis when we're burning fat for fuel.
Okay, so at any
essentially.
level, we're in ketosis, or where does that kick in to be in ketosis?
So if we want to measure it,
Yes.
and the best way to know if we're in ketosis or not, this magic number, it's if we're going to measure our ketones, we can either measure them through doing a finger prick
Yes.
test and taking a sample of our blood. So we get a keto meter, glucose meter, we use a ketone measuring stick, we prick our finger with the little device that comes with it, and we take a drop of blood. The meter will analyse the blood and it will tell us how much ketones are actually in our blood. So what we know is if we've got free ketones circulating in the blood, they must have been made by the liver.
Makes sense.
Because
Yes.
unless we're drinking ketones.
Yes.
So that's a whole different episode. We do have an episode all about exogenous ketones. If you're drinking ketones, you will expect different levels. But if you're only doing this through your diet, which most people are, then pricking your finger, finding ketones in your blood is an indicator that you're in ketosis. And we'd be looking for about 0.5 or 0.7 millimoles per litre.
That's the kind of the baseline.
That is about that's at that point, because everybody's got a little bit of ketones in their blood usually. Very, very insignificant amounts. Once we've gone above that 0.5 millimoles, then we're into ketosis. So if you're seeing levels of 1, 2, 3, you're definitely in ketosis.
And of course, there's the breath analyzers and the urine analyzers. So there's a bunch of different ways to measure ketones.
There are.
Or ketosis.
Yep.
But if you get an accurate measure, we're looking for that point, what did you say?
0.5, 0.7
Is about
where you want to be.
And then that goes up, and just as your ketosis level goes up, you're in deeper ketosis.
That's right. And so you don't need to be in the deepest level of ketosis.
So it's not a
everything.
contest?
It's not a competition.
Not a competition to get to the
It's-
highest number.
It's all fun to see. It's great to experiment with your body and see what
Yes.
what puts you deeper into ketosis and what
Yes.
brings you out. So you can get up to levels of 6 and 7. And those are usually used for people who are looking for therapeutic benefits. So if you've got something like cancer, you may be looking at those levels. If you're fasting and you're trying to get to a state of autophagy, you may see levels of 6 and 7. So maybe after a 24 or 36-hour fast. Levels of 4 and 5 are still typically the levels that we might be looking at if you are obese and looking to lose significant weight.
Right,
Or if you're trying to reverse type 2 diabetes.
right.
Levels of 2 to 3, very beneficial levels. You're going to get weight loss. So if you're overweight and trying to lose weight, levels of 2 or 3 will be helping you significantly.
Yes.
And then anywhere between that minimum of 0.5 up to about 2, that's the ideal band for maintaining your weight, maintaining your health.
And if you're in that band, your body is using ketones as its primary fuel source, and you're in ketosis.
That's right.
So therefore you can play in that band to see what's the most comfortable with your lifestyle, with fasting, with the food you eat. But if you're in that band, pretty much you're following the keto lifestyle. You are producing ketones and you're in ketosis.
That's exactly right. That you, as I said, you don't need to be in the really high levels unless you've got one of those goals in mind, the significant weight loss, the reversing, something like a type 2 diabetes, something like an Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. So if you're trying to treat a certain condition, reverse a metabolic syndrome, for example,
reason for it,
there's a reason to be in the higher levels.
Yep.
But if all you're trying to do is lose a bit of weight, or you're just looking for the health benefits, extra energy, then be confident. Anything above 0.5 millimole per litre, and do check the units on your meter.
They do change, don't they?
They are
on the
different
country.
in different countries, but if you're in millimoles per litre, 0.5 and above, you're in ketosis. So you don't have to push it any further. You are doing enough.
You just maintain that.
That's right. Now there are situations where your levels will drop. So for example, if you eat carbohydrates, then you'll knock yourself out of ketosis.
It kind of makes sense.
That's the obvious one.
Because your body goes, yes, carbohydrates, much easier.
It's if you eat 6 ounces of carbohydrates in a day, it's going to be way too much, and you will see the levels drop.
All those people who ask us questions like, if I have these carbohydrates, will it knock me out of ketosis? Yes, it will.
Yes, it will.
Because your body will choose that as an energy source.
They will. Your body will go for that preferentially, as
Absolutely.
I said. So, it's ticking along, it's using the fat, but that's a bit of an onerous process. And so you give it some carbohydrates and it goes, yeehaw, bring on the glucose. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I can kill the ketone production. Let's just use this because it's quick, easy and dirty. The body loves quick, easy and dirty, so use the carbs. So that'll drop you out. If you consume far too much protein, so not just a bit, but a lot too much, and again, you might be talking 10, 12, 15 ounces in a day, then you could again knock yourself out of ketosis.
Okay.
So that's the second way that you can do it.
Yes.
Not eating enough fat. If you're not consuming fat and you don't have a lot of body fat, the liver may not have any fuel to start with.
Makes sense.
So you're not going to produce the ketones. So you'll go out of ketosis.
Yes.
If you exercise, even though I said intense exercise can produce ketones, actually exercising, you need fuel. What's your fuel? If you're in the keto lifestyle, your
ketones.
fuel is ketones. So you may see a level of ketones after exercise. That level may drop because you've consumed some of them.
Which is good, but you need to monitor that.
And then your body will basically replenish. So if you're measuring your ketones, think about, and you're seeing the levels fluctuate, don't panic. It's only because the different levels are occurring based on what's happening with your body, whether you've eaten fat, eaten protein, fasted overnight, done exercise. So you will see those levels change during the day and day by day.
Which would have happened on the older diet, the traditional diet with glucose.
That's exactly
So you would have seen your
right.
glucose levels go up and down depending on what was happening in your day at that particular time. So it's just that we now have the ability to measure the level of fuel source, and so we're seeing these spikes and these troughs, and people are concerned it's too high or too low, or it's up and down, and so they're worried about it, but it's actually very normal.
It's very normal.
All right, so we've looked at the ketogenic lifestyle and we now understand the origins and what it's all about. We've looked at ketones, where they're produced and why, and we've looked at ketosis. So we've pretty much demythed and debunked all the 3Ks.
Yes.
So I think it's really helpful for people who are starting out, or as you say, maybe in the journey, who just want that base level of understanding around what does KKK mean and how to explain it to people, and understanding it for their own knowledge, so they know what's happening to their body and how to see what's happening on the ketogenic journey.
It is. So quick summary, I guess.
Good, go for it. Summarise.
The first thing is to be in ketosis. If you're aiming for ketosis and you want to do the keto way of eating, then essentially you're going to change the fuel source in your body. You're going to remove the glucose, which comes from carbohydrates, and you're going to bring in fats, which allow your liver to make ketones. So ketones is the source of fuel for your body. So when you're on the keto way of eating, then your body's going to have these beautiful, pure, clean burning, sustained fuel sources. And it's going to get those from either fasting, by eating dietary fat, or doing intense exercise. I don't recommend the intense exercise. It just happens to be what happens.
Absolutely.
So I recommend either fasting, and or eating dietary fats.
Okay.
So you can get yourself into ketosis, and that will be a beautiful, sustained energy source for your body. You won't see the highs and lows, you don't get the crashes that you get with the carbohydrates. You get a really nice, sustained source of energy. So just like the analogy that I like to use is like a fire, where when we start a fire, we often put kindling on a fire. And we start the fire off with kindling, and it's those dry twigs. And you chuck them on the fire, and it catches really easily, doesn't it?
Yes.
And you get the big burst of flames.
Yes.
But often you get spits, and you get smoke. And that's just like the glucose. It's like the carbohydrates.
Dirty fuel.
They're burned fast. They're burned, and they're gone. They're gone in minutes or an hour. And they're very dirty. They produce waste products in the body. Whereas ketones are like the logs that we put on the fire, or the coal, or something that burns nice and slowly. It smoulders. It gives off a nice steady heat, and it'll give it off for a long period of time, so many hours at a time. And it's actually quite clean, it's quite pure. So the body has this amazing, pure, clean fuel source that'll keep you going for days.
Excellent. Great information there. So those tuning in, thanks for joining us again on The Peaks Life. Don't forget you can listen into this on podcast, but also YouTube. And
And wherever you are, don't forget, subscribe, click the bell for notifications.
Yes,
and leave us a comment. If there's something you'd like us to cover, we really do value your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. So just pop your comments in, pop your suggestions for topics, and we'll cover those. And tune back in for the next episode coming soon.
Absolutely. See you soon.